one of the things she told me is we need to catch our children doing what's right and praise them for it more than we need to catch them doing what's wrong and punish them for it. And one of the things that she said to me, she said, because, I'm real easy to pick out what's going wrong. I mean, it's just real easy to pick out, hey, you're not doing that right or whatever. She told me before I ever said anything discouraging to our kids, anything that I told them they needed to correct, I better tell them 7 things they're doing right first. There's something about a church at night when everybody's gone that's a little different. There was a young man, and his job was to watch the things in the church. And at night, the oil in the lamp would set a glow off, and the shadows would seem big. He would lay down on his cot. All the things that he needed to do that day were done. Everything was put away. His boss, if you will, was in another room, and he was to sleep by the ark. The gold of the ark glistened off of the lamplight. And that moment that you're about to go to sleep, and everything's quiet, and you're laying there and you can feel your body relax, he hears Samuel. He gets up from his bed and he runs to the next room, and there he says, Eli, I'm here. I heard you call me. And Eli says, go back to bed. I didn't call you. So he goes back to bed thinking, wow, I must be hearing things. And he lays down again. And just as things get quiet, he hears Samuel. And he gets up, this time not so fast because he's starting to drag. And he goes to Eli's room and he says, what is it, Eli? And Eli says, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. By this time, he's getting a little frustrated because he knows he's heard his name being called. But he lays down again, but this time he's a little more wide awake and he's a little more cognizant of what's going on around him. And he lays there and he waits and he hears Samuel. And he gets up, and in his frustration, he walks back to Eli's room. And he says, did you call me? And Eli says, no, it's not me. Go back, lay down again, and when you hear your voice, say, what is it, Lord? We focus on Samuel in that story. But I want for just a moment for you to think about being Eli. You see, he was the lead minister. He was the lead guy. He was the guy that had been promised that he was going to be over the temple. His family was going to be over the temple and all the things that went along with that. But at that very moment, Eli knew, because he had been told by another prophet, that his days were coming to an end. And I wonder if Eli thought to himself, I wish I had done things differently. The passage that was read for you just a few moments ago has to do with what happened. You see, Eli had 2 kids, and Hophni and Phinehas, and those 2 kids were part of the temple. They were a part of the worship that went on there. And when the women came and to serve at the temple, they greeted them and then they took advantage of them. And when people brought meat to be sacrificed, they took what they wanted out of it. And when people brought their tithes and money to the temple to honor God, they took their share out of it. And the whole time, I'm sure Eli said to them, boys, You shouldn't be doing this. It's not right. What I want to get at today is because a lot of parents think because of the fact that they bring their kids to church that that's enough for their faith to grow. As a matter of fact, a lot of parents think that the youth minister should make sure their kids walk right. And I'm not saying that it's not a good idea to bring your kids to church. I applaud parents that bring their kids to church. I'll never forget when I first started preaching, there was a woman who had 2 young kids. Her husband did not attend. He was not a believer. And one of them was a special needs baby, and the other one was about a 2-year-old girl that just had all kinds of things that she wanted to get into. And I remember one Sunday morning as I was going out, I could tell the woman was haggard, and I said to her, I said, you need to know how much it means to me and how encouraging it is to me to see you bring your children to church. And she just broke down and wept. And I said, I'm sorry, what did I say? She says, you don't know, I needed to hear that today because this morning as soon as I got ready to go, the baby pooped on me. And I went in and I changed clothes. And after I changed clothes and I changed the baby and got us all cleaned up, I was headed towards the car, and then the baby threw up on me. And I came with milk stains on my shoulder. And I put a diaper over it so nobody would see. And from that day on, that lady never missed a service no matter what, because she knew it was encouraging to me. And parents, I want you to know it is encouraging to me, but it is important to bring your kids to church. It's important to have them at youth activities. It's important to have them in Bible class, but it's not all there is to it. As a matter of fact, I want to just kind of address something right now. I remember when I was working with the youth, we talked about this a little bit in class, brought up some memories of working with youth. I worked with a lot of teen groups. As a matter of fact, I've been going to Sunquest so long that it was named something else. I think it was called A-OK back when I went many, many years ago. But I've been going to Sunquest for so long that I feel like I'm watching, well, I know for a fact, I'm watching some of the kids that I took to Sunquest bring their kids now. That's how long ago it's been. But one of the things I remember that just really used to bother me so much was when parents would punish their kids by not letting them attend youth activities. And I'm thinking to myself, if your kid messes up in English class, do you keep them out of school for a couple of weeks to punish them? No. You bring them a tutor if you need to. I'm telling you this because I believe coming to church and being a part of a church is so important. I don't want you to get the wrong message. What I want you to get is it may not be enough. I was talking with someone the other day, and they were telling me that a lot of the people that they knew growing up have left the church altogether. And I have come to that conclusion as well. And so what I want to talk to you about today are the words from Solomon. And I want to talk to you about premeditated parenting. And you're probably thinking, well, Solomon, his son didn't turn out so great. You know, he wrote all these wise words. Solomon didn't do so great in this. Why should we listen to this? Well, I'm telling you, wise people do stupid things. Amen? How many of you in here have done something stupid in your life? Just raise your hand right now. If you're not raising your hand, you're being stupid right now, because we all know you've done something stupid. My point being is no matter what the wisdom is, you can know what to do, you can know how to do it, and you can still do wrong. And I can tell you for certainly that Solomon's words for us today would not come handed down to us if they were not something that we needed to hear. We've been doing the Summer of Wisdom for some time, and I know we've talked about a lot of different things, and some of you are sitting here right now and you're thinking about premeditated parenting. And you could be like my friend who left me the other day, and he says, I am so glad I've got my kids raised. And I looked at him and I said, yes, but you know what? It's time for me and you to step up and help the next generation raise their kids. So if you're sitting here today and you don't have kids, maybe someday you will. If you don't plan on having kids, you've got a cat and that's all you want, it's okay. You can still use this lesson. If your kids are raised and you have grandkids now, you can use this lesson. This lesson is for everybody in the room. So don't turn me off quite yet. Wait until I get real boring. Here's the passage I want you to read. A wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son grief to his mother. One of the things I'm going to tell you, I have raised 2 sons, and they are wonderful young men, and we have the best relationship, but I do not take credit for them being so great. I give God the glory and Nancy the credit, because Nancy was a much better parent than I ever even thought about being. But Solomon gave us some words, some guidance that we should look into, some words of wisdom that we should know in order to raise children, in order to work with children. And for those of you who've already raised your children and things didn't go well, use this information to make corrections in your family, in your legacy. The first thing I want you to see is there is a difference between building a house and building a home. I want you to see there's a big difference between building a house and building a home. Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 through 4 says, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And I want you to underline rare and beautiful treasures. The reason why I want you to underline that is because it's not talking about gold and silver and artwork. It's talking about memories. It's talking about relationships here. You do not have to have a lot of things to build a home. As a matter of fact, Nancy and I bought furniture when our kids were little, and within 2 weeks, me and the boys destroyed that furniture. We wrestled on it. And I'll never forget the look in Nancy's face when she realized we broke the back of the couch. And I looked at her with the boys, and the 3 of us are standing there, and she's giving us the sternest mom look you've ever seen. And I look at her and I said, but we were having fun. And at that point, Nancy determined that we would not ever buy new furniture until the boys had all left home. Just recently, we bought new furniture. You see, a home is a place of value. It's a place where people come. It's safe. It's a place that you teach. It is a place where you forgive. It is a place of joy. And one of the things that I think makes a home is it's a place of laughter. When our kids were growing up, one of the things that we wanted for them is that we wanted this to be a safe place for them. We wanted them to want to come home when things were going bad. We wanted them to know they could bring their kids to our house and it would be good. I cannot tell you the number of times we had as teenage boys. I woke up in the morning and I would get up early. I'm an early riser. And I would get up and I would go into the kitchen and I would look across our den and there would be boys laying everywhere, sleeping in all kinds of positions, because they had come over to our house and they had spent the night with our kids. Look at what it says. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down. And a house doesn't just need to be a home. It needs to be a place of gathering. It needs to be a place of joy. It needs to be a place of peace. It needs to be a place of understanding. It needs to be a place where people can express themselves. And one of the things is there's a lot of houses out there with man caves in it. I know I had one for a little while. But you know what a house needs? More than a man cave, it needs a man who will cave in. That means he will let everybody else have their way before he has his way. It means that he will be the one that will lead in service. It means he will be the one that will sacrifice the most. It means he will be the one that makes sure everybody else gets what they need before he gets what he needs. Number 2, godly living is caught more than taught. I can teach people. I can teach people all kinds of things. I can teach my sons how to do things. One of the things that I did for a while when I first started with this church is I had a construction business. I did some remodeling. I did some repair work, and I did pretty well at it. It was through word of mouth, but I had 2 sons, and I brought them along, and I showed them how to do it. I could show them how to do it all day long, but when they watched me closely because they knew they were going to have to do it, that's when they caught it. And I remember how proud I was when a lady called me and said her toilet was running, and I said, no problem, and I sent my oldest son over, and he fixed it without my help. I made him give me the money, but he fixed it without my help. My point being is you can teach all the things you want. Look at what Solomon says here. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart. Then you will with favor and win good favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. And the reason why I want you to see that is because Solomon said all the right things. He taught all the right things. Eli had to have taught all the right things. He had to say all the right things. But the sons were catching more of who they were than what they were teaching. And if you're here today and you're saying, well, son, church is important, but every opportunity I have, I miss, then you're saying to them, it's not that important. If you're saying giving is an important thing, you need to learn to give, son, but you're stingy in your giving, then you're not teaching them, because what they're going to see is things are more caught than taught. If you tell your children it's not right to steal, but you show them how you get over on others when they make a mistake, then you teach them that it's okay to steal, because things are more caught than taught. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And I want you to underline these words. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And I'm going to tell you as parents, if you will work on that, if you will make that your priority, then raising your children will work out okay for you. And I'm going to tell you that because when you are focused on loving God and doing right by God, your children will see it and they will catch what you're doing. And I've got in your notes here, and I want you to just hear this, and I want you to let this resonate with you, because I think we need to focus on G-O-D more than MVP and GPA. I know so many parents that are so proud of their kids for their academics, and I'm proud of my kids. When my kids got an A, we celebrated. It didn't happen that often, so it was good. They took after their dad, not their mom. But my kids played sports, and I was proud of them. We went to practices. We went to games. We saw things that happened. I'll never forget Tyler running. He was not the fastest runner of the bunch, but I remember cheering him on as if he was the only one that was running. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be proud of them, but I was more concerned about their character than their GPA. I was more concerned with their walk with God than them being the greatest football or baseball or running star there was. You see, all of those things are important. GPA, their sports, those are important things, but none of them are more important than their relationship with God. And parents, I'm going to tell you one of the rules we had at my house, and it may seem so archaic, it may seem so backwards to you, and it may seem like it is the worst thing ever, but if there was an activity that they wanted to do that conflicted with what was going on in the church and them being with the body of believers, they didn't do it, they went to church. And I'm here to tell you that it's very easy to get caught up in this world with so many activities going on, but you need to make God a priority in your life. Every child needs consistent consequences and not empty threats. Every child needs consistent consequences and not empty threats. I watch parents do this from time to time, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but one of the things that I have seen is I've seen a lot of parents just yell at their kids all the time, and their kids just seem to ignore it. I know I yelled at my kids some, but there was always consequences. When my yelling, my voice got up, they knew the consequences were coming. I remember as a kid one time, and I don't know the circumstances, but for some reason, I had to spend the night with a kid that was about the same age. I guess my mom and dad got tired of me for the evening. But they sent me to these people's house, and I was spending the night with them, and the kid that I was spending the night with was about the same age, and I slept in his room. But what I didn't realize is that the train track that we had played on earlier that was real close to the house, that there would be a train coming through in the middle of the night. And so about 2 o'clock in the morning, that train comes rumbling by, and I had never heard a train that close at that time in my life. And I shot up in bed, and I woke my friend up and said, "What is that?" And he says, "Oh, it's just the train. It comes by every time about this time of night. Go back to sleep." And of course, I couldn't. And I've watched parents yell at their kids so much that it's like that train. It's just a bunch of noise and it doesn't mean anything. You can't count to your kids and then let them continue to do what they're doing. I watched this girl. She was doing something mom didn't want her to do. And the woman started counting 1, 2, 3, 4. And I watched that little girl. When she got to 5, that girl stopped. And I knew that girl had had consequences, because I'd seen other parents that started counting 1. I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and nothing happens. You need to tell your kids this is the boundary and this is where it stops. Proverbs 13:24 says, "Whoever spares the rod hates their children." Underline these words, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Underline that. The one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Proverbs 19:18, "Discipline your children, for in that there is hope. Do not be a willing party to their death." Underline those words. Do not be a willing party to their death. If you don't discipline your child, you are setting them up for a course. And in that course, it may not be physical death, but it may be spiritual death. Proverbs 29:15 through 17, "A rod and a reprimand impart wisdom, but a child left undisciplined disgraces his mother. When the wicked thrive, so does sin, but the righteous will see their downfall. Discipline your children, and they will give you peace, and they will bring you delight to your desire. Number 4, rules without relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. I know some of you remember when I was preaching not too long ago, and I told you about my mom and dad would say to me all the time when they asked me to do something, and I would say, why? And they would say, because I said so. And that was the only answer they were going to give, and that was all that I had to hear, because I knew I wasn't getting any more. And I determined when I was raising my kids that I would never say because I said so when they asked me why. But I remember when my kids were little and they kept asking me why, and I got to the point and it came out in my dad's voice. Because I said so. The other day I was at Cracker Barrel and I saw a t-shirt and it said, because I said so. My point being is there's going to be times where you're going to have to say, because I said so. But most of the time, you need to teach your children why you're telling them what to do or not to do. You need to build that relationship with them. You need to have those talks, because what's going to happen at some point in your life, your kids are going to shut down and they're not going to want to talk to you. Teenagers, don't listen to this right now. Parents of teenagers, you can listen to this right now, but I want to tell you what I did. It worked real well for me. My kids didn't want to talk to me as teenage boys because I was an old fart, and they didn't even like hanging out with me, but I was their dad. They didn't have any choice. And so I would put them in a car, and we would go and we would drive for an hour, and I would turn off the radio so it had to be silent. And I would wait. And I would wait, and I would wait, and eventually they couldn't take the silence anymore, and they would have to say something. And that's how the conversation started. Folks, you need to have those relationships because you need to be able to hear what their dreams are. You need to be able to hear what their desires are. You need to be able to hear what they're struggling with, and you need to be able to have that conversation. Proverbs 3:11 and 12, so son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in. We need to encourage far more than we discourage. And I've got that in your notes, and I've got a couple of other scriptures for parents to go home and look up and read for themselves. But I want to tell you something that Nancy taught me early on when we were raising kids. And I still think to this day it's a brilliant idea. As a matter of fact, I know that it has been made into a book for people who lead in business. But one of the things she told me is we need to catch our children doing what's right and praise them for it more than we need to catch them doing what's wrong and punish them for it. And one of the things that she said to me, she said, because, I'm real easy to pick out what's going wrong. I mean, it's just real easy to pick out, hey, you're not doing that right or whatever. She told me before I ever said anything discouraging to our kids, anything that I told them they needed to correct, I better tell them 7 things they're doing right first. So every morning I got up and I began to look at all the things they're doing right so that I could get my 7 times in. So when it came time, I could tell them. It was intentional. And I know some of you have those kids that are just hard to handle. I've been around some of those kids. My boys were fairly easy because Nancy took care of most of the hard, heavy lifting. But I know there's some kids that it's just hard, but you have to be intentional with your children to make sure that you are saying things that are encouraging them rather than discourage them. And number 5, you can pick your children, but you can't pick, or you can't pick your children, but you can pick their friends. You can't pick your children, but you can pick their friends. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffer harm." If you have a home where the kids are welcome all the time, you're going to be able to pick your kids' friends, because they're not going to bring people over that they know you're going to disapprove of. Like I said a few moments ago, when high school was around, our house was the place to come. I remember one day, Tyler was big into computers and computer games, and one day I came home and it looked like our living room, dining room, and kitchen was an IT department. Because every kid he knew that liked the same games that he liked and played the same things that he was playing was at our house. And they had monitors everywhere, computers everywhere. I know our electric bill went up another $50 that night, because there was so much going on. But one of the things that I remember is Nancy always made sure there was plenty of snacks in the house for those kids. And they could drink all the sweet tea and water they wanted. Most of the kids that came over, they were all concerned about their physique, so they drank water. We didn't have to spend a lot of money on Coke and those kinds of things. But there was one boy, and his name happened to be Tyler too, and it was Tyler and Tyler, so I called him TNT, because they were like dynamite when they were together. They were always blowing something up. But the two of them came together, and one of the things that Tyler, he became a part of our family for the most part during high school, because he was over there so much. And I'll never forget, one day I'm sitting there, I'm watching TV with him, and Tyler, our guest, got up and went to the refrigerator like it was his house, and got in there and was looking around for something to eat. And I thought, that's success right there. And then I loved the fact he was vegetarian, and other than that, he was a good kid. But he was vegetarian, and I love the fact that when Nancy would make something for our kids who were not vegetarian, she would make something separate for Tyler, because he was vegetarian, and she wanted him to feel like it was his house too. Our son moved to Virginia. He's gone. He's been gone for some time. But this last Christmas, I was in my front yard, and a car pulled up I didn't recognize. And it was Tyler Polias, and he got out of his car, and he wanted to see me and Nancy and wish us a Merry Christmas, because he was a part of our family. I'm not saying Tyler Polias was the best kid there ever was for my kids to hang out with, but I am saying this: he certainly wasn't the worst. One of the things that we're doing at this church right now is we're trying to make it a place where kids can bring their friends, where they can build relationships, where they can have relationships with other adults. This will be a place that we have kids come that they can feel safe. And I would say to you as parents, make sure your kids are involved in these kinds of youth activities, because these are the kinds of kids that you want your kids to hang out with. Proverbs 18:24. But the one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs 22 and Proverbs 27, those are for other people to look at later. But I do have a warning here. You can do everything right as a parent, and your kids can still choose to go a different direction. No matter how hard you try, no matter how much influence you have on them, no matter what you want for them, they have free will just like you do. And these proverbs are not promises. If you do this, this will happen. These are the things that if you'll do, more than likely this is the outcome that you're going to have. And I want to say this to you because I know there are some parents that are out there that are listening online, that are here in the audience. Their kids have taken a path that you didn't want them to take. But I am going to tell you this, they have a choice, and you can do everything right, and they can still choose to go down the wrong path. A wise son heeds his father's instructions, but a mocker does not respond to rebukes. I know that the majority of you in here don't have young kids. And you're probably thinking either one of two things. I'm glad this sermon is over because I don't need this. Or number two, I sure wish I had done things differently. I'm going to tell you this. If you're in the second side of that and you're thinking, I sure wish I had done things differently. My kids are estranged from me. They're estranged from the Lord. They're non-believers. They've gone down a path that I do not like. I want to tell you this. The most powerful tool you have is prayer. And I want to repeat that again because a lot of times our prayers are not answered right away. A lot of times we seem like we've prayed and we've prayed and we've prayed and things are not happening. And I'm going to tell you the most powerful tool you have is prayer. I'll never forget this one lady came back to church. Her mother attended. Her mother was in her 80s. I believe this woman was in her 40s. She came back to church. She responded to the invitation. She rededicated her life to Christ. And after she rededicated her life to Christ, I saw her mother in one of the classroom, and her mother was weeping. And I said, this is a great day. Why are you back here crying? Why aren't you out there with everybody? She said, because I've been praying and praying for this day. And last week I said to God, I give up. She's never going to come back to you. I give up. And I held her hand and she says, why did I give up when God didn't? So if you have someone in your family that you love that is not living the way you want them to live, don't stop praying. That may be the very thing that gets them where they need to be. We come here on Sundays. We come here for so many different reasons. Some people come out of habit. I come because I get to see you guys. That and they pay me to be here. I come to worship. Some people come because they're trying to figure it all out. Some people come because their friend comes. Some people come because their spouse makes them come. I know a lot of kids come because some parent makes them come. I was on jury duty this past week, and about halfway through the trial, halfway through the deliberation from the trial, one of the jurors looked at me and said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "Well, I'm a preacher." And she says, "I would have thought you were a comedian." I said, most of the people that hear me think I'm a comedian. But my point being is we come here for different reasons. You may come because you think Neal's entertaining. You may come because you love Jason's song leading. You may come because you love a Bible class teacher. For whatever reason you're here today, I want you to stop for a moment and think about eternity. Just think about eternity. We did a funeral yesterday, and it was a hard day for a lot of people, including me. But the joy that came from knowing that my buddy Gary is in a better place is far more exceeds my grief. And I looked around the room and I saw another friend that I know is not going to be with us much longer. And I poured into him and his wife as much as I could with the little bit of time I had with them. But one of the things that I find joy and comfort in is that I am going to see that friend like I'm going to see Gary, like I'm going to see Glenn, like I'm going to see Randy, like I'm going to see my mother-in-law, and like I'm going to see Bobby Groves. And the list goes on and on. Because I know those folks will be in heaven. And today, I want you to decide as we sing this invitation song, I'm going to be in heaven with everyone else. It may very well be that you need to be put on Christ in baptism. If you need to put on Christ in baptism today, we have all things ready. It may be that you need to rededicate your life to Christ. You can do that publicly or privately. It may be that you have sin that has become public knowledge and you need to repent of publicly. Whatever the case, will you come as we stand and sing?